Hey everybody, this is Ben, and today I am going to be making another DM's guide, this time to take you through creating some thematic items and weapons, and some thematic creatures. So for the culture we're going to be using the land and people that we created in our first DM guide video. The Orntip Steppe for the land, and the Sakuzai for the people. They are sort of based on the ancient Scythians and the medieval Turks. So, yeah, there's a few other things that I've added into my personal usage, but I like to base places off of real-life peoples and base, big moments off of historical stuff. And now for the abridged version. Hey, everybody. This is Ben. I realized that this video is a bit long, so I'm going to basically have the abridged actual advice that I would give, and then I'm going to tell you how Hey everybody, this is Ben. I realized that this video is a little bit longer than I intended it for it to be, because I was having fun working through some stuff, so I think that I'm going to just drop in the actual advice that I would give here at the start, and then you'll see me working through the way that I create magical items and creatures for a place that are sort of on theme. So I already have the stuff in because I've already made it, but when you are working on a item or weapon that is in a specific place that you have created, what you want to keep in mind is, why would it be necessary? Why would it be something that would be created by, if it's a religious item, why would it be created by this group? If it is just a useful magical item, why would it be created? If it's a weapon, what threat was it made to combat? That sort of thing is what you want to think about. Now on to creatures. For creatures, it's the same thing. You want to have them make sense for the place that they are in, so I like to use the mythology and folklore of a place that I'm using as a basis. The Tulpar here that I have is very similar to a Pegasus. Makes sense, this is a horse riding economy. So it is a horse with wings, but I think that it is more of a beast than a Pegasus would be. So it has much more of a horse-like demeanor. It's probably easier to get one if you can find them, because there's probably not many left. So they might be something that they interact with because an NPC has one. It might be like a goal of some people in this country, like maybe it's a thing that a bunch of young men decide to do. They're like, you know what, I'm taking a year, and I'm going to go look for one of these. You could do something like that. Something like that is interesting. For a more aggressive monster that your party might actually fight, think about what would be frightening to the people here. What would make it something that would be difficult to go with. So maybe if it is a place where everybody lives in a city, you have these creatures that lurk in common places that are less easy to watch. Maybe like here, you have a forest monster, and since this is a plains region, you would be a little bit more afraid of a place where it's a bit easier to sneak up on people. And maybe that's what you go with. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed the video, because even the abridged version of this is very, very long. So thank you. Bye. So we're going to start off with our items. So I have a very simple template that I will post, just if you would like to use it, maybe add something new in, take something out. It's up to you. But I have the name, the type, the primary use, a possible secondary use, its creator, cultural or historic significance, and then growth. That's because I like magic items that can sort of evolve over the course of the game, if you're playing D&D. And by that I mean, oh, you got this weapon at level 4, so it does this much damage if it's a weapon, or it does this if it's a magic item. At a certain point, you have developed into a stronger person, or you've used this enough that essentially, like, there is a bond between the two of you, or you are more capable of reaching in and taking its arcane properties and shoving them out into the physical world. Just that sort of thing. And so, since it is thematic, I figured we would start off with a weapon and then do 2 items. And since our Sakuzai are plains nomads who ride on horses, I figured that we would go with our best bet for what they would use, which would be long swords, but really sabers, cavalry sabers, good for hacking from the back of a horse, and the short bow, which would be like a recurve bow. To pick which one we're going to work on, I think we will just flip a coin. So heads is a sword because you're fighting head on, and tails is your bow. Okay, tails. So we are going to be creating a recurve bow. And since we're doing this for fun, let's go ahead and make a magic item. We won't make it. Let's make it a pretty big deal. So let's go with our name first. So we know that the leader of the tribes that ride outside of the city are the Skolotai, and we know that the gold trade from Kosnodar is a big deal. So I think this is going to be the bow of a historically somewhat important Skolotai. So let's name it Gold Fletch. Yeah, I think that's cool. Its type is a weapon bow. Its primary use, weapon. Shooting people. So we'll say primary use is combat, and a possible secondary use. So let's think about what Gold Fletch is and what it does. So it is a recurve bow. I think that it looks like a normal bow. Like, it actually looks like a pretty old, rundown bow. But when you string it, the wood sort of takes on a new quality, and the bowstring, even if you use a simple regular one, suddenly turns gold. I think that is kind of cool, so that you would be riding along. And maybe you don't use arrows, maybe you fire light. Like, instead of shooting an arrow, when you pull back on the string with nothing there, an arrow of light emerges. That is my favorite type of magical bow, is a magical bow that creates like a bolt of lightning, or just a arrow that is a elemental type. So I don't know that that would have a secondary use. There is always a way that your players could use that. So maybe if you put an arrow there, you actually get a physical golden arrow, which would be useless for like combat, because it would be gold. But maybe, yeah. Once a day chance of 3 gold worth golden arrow. So, like, as a percentage chance, you could place an arrow and pull it back, and it could possibly turn to gold, or it could, like, wither to dust. And that's a way that you can sort of make it seem useful, so that if, like we say, like we're going to put, there's growth, your players are incentivized to keep Gold Fletch even after they find a stronger bow for your ranger or fighter. Its creator, let's say shaman of one of the great clans. So the Skolotai who used it will be from a major clan. Shaman of one of the great clans. Sister to the Skolotai who used it. And we're going to name him... Let's see, what is our current Skolotai's name? Because I think maybe he was named to have something similar. So Baragos, let's say Baragor. Or Baragor. Used it. Baragor. Spent time training in the city. Kosnodar. City. Learned some transmutation from the priestesses. And enchanted the bow. We'll just say enchanted the bow. Enchanted a normal bow. So I think, yeah, the idea that it's gold fletch is because it is like creating an arrow of golden light as it goes. So I think that with the idea of there being some transmutation involved, maybe that's a cool way that you can use it in your setting. Like maybe if you're playing D&D, you have a wizard who's the villain, and they are looking for... There's a ritual they're doing, and they need to find items for each of the principal schools of magic, and so you give your sorcerer the evocation one early on, and that introduces the plot. So you give your sorcerer the evocation one very early on, and that sort of introduces the plot. You could have one of the possible transmutation items for this ritual could be gold fletch, and your party could try and get it or not, letting them have something or possibly getting a new impressive magic item. So there you go, you've got gold fletch. The cultural or historic significance, I think used by Scholar 2 of a great clan used in a I think used in a pitched battle with invading army. So you know what? I'm gonna say Skulatai of a great clan who became High Skulatai. I bet you that it's actually pronounced Skoloti, and I'm just being incorrect, but sorry if I am. Used in a pitched battle with invading army, taken back to that nation. So it'll be taken back by, let's say that this was the second great invasion by our not quite Achaemenid Empire, coming in from the sort of southeast to the Orntip steppe. And basically this guy, Baragor, he was High Skulatai, and so he led the fight and managed to really wear them down. So it was taken back to that nation and brought back with other items of import as a sign of good faith. But then maybe Baragor was supplanted, or so Baragor died. Maybe his clan fell out of favor. Like with the Skulatai who seized control after his death really hated him, and so when they got Gold Fletch back, maybe he tossed it onto the pyre of Baragor. Maybe the next time that the clan was riding through there, it was tossed. And so this big place where a lot of people were buried or burned has now sort of turned into maybe a small marsh or something. You know, there's something that's happened in this area. So now Gold Fletch is hidden from civilization, and because maybe it was taken back to our not quite Achaemenid Empire, and it was brought back like 100, 200 years later. Like it was like, you know what? We want more of your gold, so here's a few things that we took when we came in to invade you. Would you like them back? And it just looked like a normal bow. So instead of it being a angry response to Baragor's legacy, instead it was just like, you know, we don't need this bow, so maybe it was just left with... maybe instead it was left... so the clan of Baragor didn't fall out of favor. Left with body on pyre. So maybe like an older Sakuzai person was just died of sickness. And so they gave them this bow to be like a shepherding thing. I don't recall if I wrote anything about like funeral rituals. I should have written about that. Oh no. Okay. Well, hey, if you're making a culture, it's good to have some funeral stuff in mind. So let's say that they burn a body and then make a small cairn for like a group at a time, so that they're not using up too much of the land for the assembled ashes. The bow did not burn, but it was just sort of left in place because nobody wanted to use it because, you know, they did not... I feel like they would understand. I'm having to decide in real time whether this would be like a thing that people would recognize, because then the players could learn the history of the item. So I think they would. Left with the body of a Skolatai on the pyre. But did not burn. And I think that maybe it was a enemy Skolatai, and so he was left to burn by one of the other clans. Yeah, I like that. So basically, Skolatai won. They decided to take his better magical bow, and then they just left this bow that they were like, you know what, to sort of honor him, we will leave Goldfletch a item of some significance, and well, I'm going to take your better bow. And then they rode off, because even though they were giving him some... Maybe it's in the custom that a Skolatai is... You cannot like leave their body unburned, and that's why they decide to burn it, and they have to give certain rights to that body. And then 20 years later, your adventurers find it. So that's a long way to go. But we now have our reason for Goldfletch being something that they can find. For growth, what if... so our early stage is going to be that it fires light arrows. What if we can say that at a later stage the light arrows also become physical as they fly? So that... because I'm thinking it just does radiant damage right now. Like, it doesn't do any piercing damage. I'm thinking that when it upgrades, we get like a much bigger dice. We get like bigger dice rolls for its piercing damage. So growth, unlock, piercing damage becomes a +1. And I am going to give this weapon an extra feature because I think that's cool. So let's change short bow to gold fletch. So it becomes a +1 bow after you sort of unlock it, and it does additional piercing damage. So the damage is going to be, let's say, 2d6 light damage to start. Categories, items, yeah, it's a bow. Damage type, I guess it's not light damage, it's radiant damage, I know that. Damage type, radiant. Item rarity, very rare. I don't know, I've created a lot of items for Dungeons & Dragons, and I don't really know how to change their power based on rarity. That doesn't make much sense to me. Yeah, ammunition, range, 200. No ammunition, because it creates its own arrows. Yeah, range 2-handed, range 80 to 320, sure, and weight 2. So then let's add the additional feature. When fired from horseback, attacks have a +2 to hit enemies not mounted. Hit unmounted enemies. +2 to hit unmounted. So there we go. Gold Fletch, fired from horseback. You get +2 if you're firing at somebody who's not on a horse or on any sort of creature. And it fires light arrows. And then we'll put unlocked an additional, let's say 2d8 piercing damage. So yeah, let's change it from 2d6. Let's say 2d4. I think that's kind of fun. Because then it's basically like you're doing a longbow amount of damage with your short bow. But you won't always... You always do at least 2 radiant damage. And then what I think is nice is you won't get the bonus from firing with dex when you use Gold Fletch. Like, you don't get your dexterity damage, which could be interesting, could make using it kind of a bargain. But yeah, now we have Gold Fletch. How much time have I been recording? 19 minutes, and I've only done 1 item. Oh no. Alright, let's kind of breeze through the rest. Okay, so name. Now we're going to do our not... Okay, so now we're going to do our not weapons. We're going to just do items. So I'm going to put down 2 items. I know what the first one is. I've kind of given it some thought, and I'm going to call it Bridle of the Wind. And so its primary use is for increasing the speed and stamina of one's mount. Again, sort of thinking about the reason that this item would exist for this group of people. So it is a horse riding culture, needs to have some good horse items. Possible secondary use, don't think it needs one. Creator, that'll be, let's say, Ancient Shaman. So 2 items created by Shaman. Our next item will be created by a Priestess within the city, which will be more in tune with a Cleric or Wizard instead of cool Shaman magic that is more fun. Cultural or historic significance. Maybe there are a few of these. Let's say there actually are a lot, but most of them are probably in use by powerful people. 20 made for different Skolotai. 20 made for different Skolotai. A sign of great virtue and strength to own one. A sign of great trust to be given one. So maybe one of your characters rides your horse. Rides your horse. So maybe one of your characters in the sort of arc that you have your characters here on the Ortip step, maybe they start riding horses and they decide, you know what, I like fighting on horseback. And they talk to you and you decide, okay, you take enough time sort of learning with your learning on horseback what to do. You kind of gain the mounted combat feat. Like you have it. I do that. I think when a person demonstrates a willingness for their character to pursue something, I think it's fun to give them a skill or a feat because, D&D, we make the rules. And I think that if, say, your fighter or ranger decides, you know what, I like my horse, I think my character likes my horse a lot, they're going to start riding them more often. You could have there be a moment where on their horse they do an impressive thing for an NPC who has one of these, Bridle of the Wind. Basically, they are given it as a gift because, maybe they save somebody's life and put their own life at risk. And so then they now have this, and it further incentivizes that bond with their new horse. Or it could be something completely different. Maybe they're a halfling who rides a blink dog, and they put on the bridle of the wind. Growth, no secondary use. Just riding. And so the bridle of the wind. The speed of a mount by 100%, and the HP by half of its maximum. So that your riding horse who has an HP of, I don't know, like 12, it would go up to 18. Okay, and now our final magic item. God, that would make a... If you had like a cheetah as a mount, you'd be riding a bullet. Okay, final magic item. So this is a magic item. Let's say that this is like a legendary magical artifact. I'm a big fan of amulets, but I don't think I want to do an amulet. So let's say Mask of... Do I have a name for the... They worship the Sky Fathers, so let's say Mask of the... Mask of... Let's just say Mask of the Cloud for now. Maybe you come up with a cooler name. Primary use. So let's say... So this is a magical item created by the priestesses within Kostnodar. They are trying to make this mask to have a practical purpose, but maybe it's been lost because it was uber powerful. So gold is a big thing, so maybe it's another transmutation item. So maybe in this plot line that we are sort of thinking about, these magical enemies need a transmutation item. They could either take Gold Fletch, and if your party goes after Gold Fletch once they've heard, oh, you know, the burial at the burning site of Skolatai some time ago, we believe that Gold Fletch is there. Maybe they go there, or they go after this, the Mask of the Cloud. And so it's a transmutation item. So maybe its primary use, let's say that it's a super powerful one, gives an additional spell slot for transmutation spells. So, like, you know, if you can cast one transmutation spell per long rest without using up a spell slot. So that's pretty powerful. Possible secondary use. So let's give it a secondary use, which is... Let's do something super powerful. This is what I think will actually be more attractive about it. Cast Flight as a first level spell. So now you can cast Flight with much less costly spell slots. Creator, entire Temple of the Sky Father. So the Flight is what makes it Mask of the Cloud, but then because transmutation is, I think, sort of the theme of a lot of the magic. Okay, so the entire Temple of the Sky Father worked on this together, basically meaning that that's why it's as powerful as it is. And, you know, you can decide to level this and change it, and if a character gets this and you realize, oh my god, for my particular campaign, them being able to fly this often is not good. I think the spell is Fly. Fly as a first level spell. So you decide, you know what, it would be better if you can't fly this easy, maybe you change it to like a third level spell. It might be a third level spell. I'm not going to check. Cultural and historic significance. Extremely important before disappearance. Disappearance was worn by High Priestess at all times. So anytime that she was out and around... Anytime that she was out and around people who weren't involved in the faith, I think she would be wearing this. And now it's gone. And so I think the Mask of the Cloud might be in your unique dungeon. That might be the thing that's at the very end, and maybe you decide to give it to our Katiari, or you decide to keep it and let your wizard cast fly at first level. So now we're going to transition over to our creatures. I bet we have taken up a lot of time. Yes, we have. I'm going to have to edit a lot. So our creatures, this is something that I think is a lot of fun, because it is a lot of fun to create creatures, monsters that have a bit of a different feel than some of the D&D stuff. And what you're doing when you create creatures, at least if you do them the way that I do, is you're really just changing their cosmetics and sort of the way that they interact with your setting. And I'm going to show that by basically letting Dungeons & Dragons do most of the work. Because our first creature is not a monster, it is a tulpar, which are similar to a Pegasus. I think that the tulpar would be interesting if, instead of having sort of shoulder wings like the Pegasus, maybe they have their wings come out of the side. So like just above where the body merges with the forearms. So with wings more on its side than its back. So essentially you are looking at a horse that maybe glides more than like flies up, so that it could sort of do the like cruising in circles that a hawk does. And let's go ahead and give you our name, Tulpar. Survival, grazing, herbivore. Horses might be omnivores, they probably are. Motives, nothing. Nothing. Live, have kids. Morals, let's say good creatures. However you define good. Good creatures seek to aid mortals when they see them in peril. Only allow those who do not do undue harm ride them. So if your characters, if your players are constantly going around and murdering people, probably not going to ride a Tulpar. Fighting style, let's put it into motives. Let's say hiding most of the time in mountains. Fighting style, kicking, flying away. What's the best way to fight? Run away. For the stats, I think this is the good thing, is we can just take an existing creature, put it in. There you go. Except they're not a celestial, they're just a beast. They're a natural beast. So then, say for instance you got the say that you got one of these guys to help you out and they decided to stick around, you could put the Bridle of the Wind on your Tulpar, and then you're looking at a speed of 120 feet when they're riding around, and 180 feet when you are flying through the sky. So I think that that is understands nothing. So beast speaks beast. Speaks horse. Yeah, but you have this very interesting winged horse that, more than a Pegasus, is just a horse. Like if I had the riding horse stats, I would change like its intelligence and charisma down to what a horse's are. But now we're gonna do a monster, and that is going to be a Shurail. A Shurail is a monster that is kind of more Slavic, from what I've read, than some of the other stuff that I would like to be kind of putting into the Sakuzai and their whole structure. But they are sort of they are found in stories in Turkey, so I think that we can kind of work from there. And the Shurail are forest spirits with thick fur, long nails, and a great horn on their head. So I think that they are going to be sort of the size of like a human, but they have this really long fur that's like maybe matted like a sheep all across their body, and that way they have maybe some natural armor that can be kind of hard to get through. Survival, eating humans. Their motives, I think they, so they are tricksters, like they're called the tickling monster, and I think that they like to tickle you and tickle them to death. Yeah, so I think their motives are sort of trickster monsters who eat those who fall for their tricks, lurk in shadows of long trees. And so basically they're just kind of, you know, skulking about, waiting for people to stop for water at a nearby river, and then they'll pull a trick. I think that they can shape change, probably as part of their thing. Their morals, none. Chaotic. They are just self-serving, but will occasionally do some things that maybe... So maybe if your party meets one and the Shurail that they have met decide to speak to it, maybe it'll be actually helpful. But they've already met one that when they accepted its help, because they didn't want to judge a book by its cover, he tried to eat them. So maybe now one of them is just like, you know what? I don't have anything to do today. I'm actually going to help these people. Maybe your party just decides not to trust him, and you get to have a fun roleplay encounter where your furry, long-nailed horn guy is very hurt by the party not wanting his help. None, chaotic, and then fighting style, scratches with claws or horn. Drains life because of the stat block that I've decided to use, and then causes laughing fits. And so I have, in searching for monsters to use, creatures to use, there is a lot of Tatar mythology that has a lot of the creatures in it are sort of the undead. So I decided to go with a character who would be, or a creature that would be pretty challenging in the regular D&D book, and go with the white. So I think that they would have similar stats to the white. So they can do some good damage, but instead of doing a multi-attack with their sword, instead it's going to be claws. And then they can do life drain. I thought that would be kind of cool. Like maybe they kind of eat you, because there are a lot of things on this list that say similar to vampires. And I think that that's kind of fun. But then I think that one of their other actions is fit of laughter. And what that would be, and I'm not going to type it out because we're already taking a lot of time, is it's basically like an amped up version of Tasha's hideous laughter, but maybe instead of doing like just the DC would be a little bit harder than maybe the Shurail's stats would say. Maybe instead it just has a higher DC and there's no damage, but it can just keep you laughing for multiple turns. Like, oh, you have to beat a 17 wisdom, intelligence check, whichever, and if you don't, you're laughing and you're rolling on the ground, and the Shurail can come over and drain your life, hit you with them claws. Just because that would be pretty scary, to be unable to stop laughing. Our last one is, I think, one of the easier ones, because there is a creature called a Urbaru, who is a creature like werewolf. I love werewolves. They're a thing that I'm into, so let's just say werewolf. And we're just going to say survival, eating creatures, hopefully not human. I am a strong proponent in the idea that no vampire is good. I don't like good vampires in fiction. I love good werewolves. Motives: keep people safe. Do not spread the curse. Some have more sinister motives. But, if you're going to be using werewolves, it's probably a good idea to have some that your party can fight. Your party isn't going to be made up of all people who are like me, who think, werewolf? You mean good guy. The morals for the werewolf, I think they're humans half the time. So, in beast form, survival, food, that order. Don't get killed and eat. Fighting style, gore with claws and teeth. And then, so there's nothing to be found about the Urbaru. Looking up the Urbaru, I could not find it almost anywhere. So they can purposefully change into this being, or it can be that they have had this curse. And so I think that maybe are more aged and maybe wizened Urbaru, maybe they are, just because I don't want to just tell you, hey, just make a werewolf, even though it's fun to have werewolves. I think that you could have maybe, for some of the flavor, that occasionally your party would come across a werewolf and be terrified, and then they would just speak like with this elegant thing, and maybe the werewolf is a shaman that they met who's just like, no, I'm not cursed, I can just do this. It's just a thing that I can do. And you get to have an interesting thing. Maybe the werewolf shows up and it's in like a shaman's robe that they've met, and they think, oh god, he's gonna eat us because he's out of his normal personality and into his beast personality. And it's just like, oh, hello, hi, I'm your friend, I'm a werewolf right now, sorry about that. Just because I think that would be kind of fun. And then you can add in the stats, and maybe they have a different weakness than a werewolf from a different place. Maybe instead of their weakness being silver, maybe part of the difficulty of living here is that maybe instead of silver, their weakness is gold. Not made with gold weapons. So maybe every tribe, like there are a few people when your party like walks through that like, oh, people are sharpening, working a whetstone over their iron and steel weapons, but then you see a few people with gold weapons, and if you have players who are people like me, they're like, it's very weird, it's probably not a very good weapon. But it turns out, you get to reveal later down the line that these are for killing Urbaru if there is nothing else to be done. And maybe there is like a special tent for each of the clans that they have that is made for keeping Urbaru away from everyone. Maybe there's like a pit dug beneath one of the tents, and then the tent is weighed down with massive stones, and there are these people with gold weapons posed around it, and the party just sees this one night that they're sleeping with this clan. One of them gets water outside of their tent and sees this, and it's a really interesting thing that you can't really explain at the time. I mean, you can explain if they look into it. I've made a cool thing now. This is it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about D&D stuff for a new place. I like world building, and I have two settings that I don't know if I can just drop the Orntip step into. But this was a fun video. I'm gonna have an abridged thing that I'm gonna put at the start. So let me go ahead and have a outro. But anyway, this was a fun video on the Orntip Steppe and the Sakuzai people. I hope that you enjoyed seeing how I create weapons like Goldfletch, or items like the Bridle of the Wind, and creatures like the Tulpar and the Shurail, because I certainly enjoyed making them. Thanks!